Well, you guys, you really should look into the Dayton-Miller ether drift interferometer experiments that were conducted shortly after the Michelson-Morley interferometer experiment, singular, because you know what? Michelson and Morley, they never detected a null result like it is claimed that they had. That's because scientism had their ugly tentacles wrapped around this whole idea to choke ether out of the equation within the scientific community. But you know what? Ether is real. Ether exists. Michelson and Morley were supposed to conduct more seasonal, every 3 months, experiments to further test whether or not the ether did exist. And that additional experiment was actually showing a slightly positive result. It wasn't a null result. The fact of the matter was it was a lower altitude and there were different temperature fluctuations, and it was in a basement underground encased in wood, which greatly inhibited the ether. Dayton-Miller. You really should look up Dayton-Miller, ladies and gentlemen. Dayton-Miller. I'll give you this link at the bottom of the page, because this has to do with showing not only that ether exists and that scientism has tried to quash its existence and replace it with fictitious gravity, but also in this current day and age you can understand why they claim to have detected gravitational waves using their highly long, precise, and extremely vacuumized interferometers. Let's see what Dayton here says. He says, goes to disprove Einstein theory. Case scientist will conduct further studies in ether drift. Einstein discounts experiments. Speaking before scientists at the University of Berlin, Einstein said the ether drift experiments at Cleveland showed 0 results. While on Mount Wilson, they showed positive results. Now, Mount Wilson is the mountain in which Dayton-Miller conducted his experiments. Therefore, altitude influences results. In addition, temperature differences have provided a source of error. The trouble with Professor Einstein is that he knows nothing about my results, Dr. Miller said. He has been saying for 30 years that the interferometer experiments in Cleveland showed negative results. See, he lied. The blatant liar. We never said that they gave negative results, and they did not, in fact, give negative results. He ought to give me credit for knowing that temperature differences would affect the results. He wrote to me in November suggesting this. I am not so simple as to make no allowance for temperature. So, Dayton-Miller, here's a picture of him. Look at some of these quotes that Einstein said. The effect of ether drift has persisted throughout after... Oh, this is what Dayton-Miller said. After considering all the possible sources of error, there always remained a positive effect. Einstein says, my opinion about Miller's experiments is the following. Should the positive result be confirmed, then the special theory of relativity with its general theory of relativity in its current form would be invalid. He also said, I believe that I have really found the relationship between gravitation and electricity, assuming that Miller's experiments are based on fundamental error. Otherwise, the whole relativity theory collapses like a house of cards. Oh yeah, it does collapse like a house of cards because it's not true. You guys got to understand the propaganda behind this whole scam. This whole scam to try to hide the ether, and they're doing it today. They're doing it today. I'll get to that. But anyway, look at the Dayton-Miller's interferometer at 4.3 meters across was the largest and most sensitive of this type of apparatus ever constructed, with a mirror reflecting round-trip light beam path of 64 meters. It was used in a definitive set of ether drift experiments on Mount Wilson. This was, I think it was like 3 times as big as the Michelson-Morley apparatus, and they were supposed to conduct it on seasonal occasions, but they never did. Why? Hey, that does not sound too experimental, especially going along with the scientific method of repeating your results, repeating your experiments. That you failed, Michelson-Morley. You were bought off, or whatever the case was, but you did not conduct a scientific experiment there, did ya? Did ya? So, and what happened in the end was there was this crony idiot named Shankland, who actually I think he was an assistant of Dayton-Miller. After Dayton-Miller died, like 13 years later or whatever, Einstein tried to discredit Miller's positive ether results. And so Shanklin went in there and he just looked into some of the notes and archives and tried to say that it was due to temperature. But Miller had already addressed the temperature fluctuations, and despite that, he did find that the ether drift was real. Now, given that Miller was a heliocentrist as well, but he did find an ether drift, and that goes to show you that it works very well with understanding concave Earth, and this concave stationary Earth, and there's this ether drift that's spinning predominantly from east to west. That's why airplanes take longer going westward, because that ether drift is pushing downward. It's a centrifugal divergent force emanating from the celestial sphere in the center. But yeah, so the interferometry was proven to show an ether drift. Look at the, I'll give you the link for this webpage here. And then now that you understand that, you understand the botchery job that they're doing, scientism is doing with the gravitational wave bullshit. What they're doing is they're taking, it's really an extremely highly sensitive, even bigger interferometer that they have. But the problem is they're using like this 1 megawatt, or is it a kilowatt laser that they're using? But in any event, what they're doing is they're pumping out all the air of this interferometer, and they're also heating it up, and so it's a very high temperature and there's no air whatsoever. And so what they're doing is trying to make up their own version of an interferometer that would normally detect an ether drift, but they're eliminating all these hindrances, or actually they're eliminating all the variables that would easily detect an ether drift in order for them to detect a gravitational wave. Now, a gravitational wave is just simply an extremely long ether wave that's detected after all these variables are in place. You know, high vacuum, high heat, and so that's all they're doing. And they're renaming it. They're calling it a gravitational wave, and they're making the bonehead assumption that these gravitational waves must have been derived from a pair of black holes converging together and creating this warp in the fabric of space-time. Total bullshit. So that's what it's all about, ladies and gentlemen. It's scientism at its fraudulent finest, and it's simply understanding that there is an ether. It's not a gravitational wave. Gravity is fictitious, and it's an ether drift. That's after you take out all the air, after you keep it at a consistent temperature, a very hot temperature, you get this extremely minute long wavelength, and there's a slight variance of compression versus rarefaction of this wave. And so they're saying this slight variance is showing a ripple. They're showing a ripple. It's at like 1 to the net, minus 30 as far as meters, whatever they're saying. But that's what you're doing. That's what you're just detecting ether after putting it in a very stable environment. You're pumping out all the air. You're pumping out all the other ether noise that you would detect, and you're just filtering everything out so you can detect these extremely hard to detect waves, and then you're just reclassifying them and calling them gravitational waves. It's just the ether. The ether exists, ladies and gentlemen. And so that's what it's all about, and that's why they can let's see, what was that one? They have what they call a 4-meter ring laser gyro that they say can detect the rotation of the Earth. I don't have the link, so I'll just have to look it up really quick here. And yeah, there it is. High accuracy ring laser gyroscopes, Earth rotation detection. What is going on here with this, obviously, is that they're detecting the ether as well. And one of the issues that they're facing, that they can't figure out, is frame dragging. Einstein said, well, hypothetically speaking, if gravity exists and these planets are moving and spinning and, affecting the fabric of space-time, there's going to be this thing called frame dragging that Lenz and Thirring discovered, or helped discover after Einstein proposed it. The problem with this frame dragging is that they cannot detect it. They say they might be able to detect it one of these days. It is possible to show that further improvement in accuracy could allow the observation of the metric frame dragging, but they can't because it's not real. Earth is not spinning. It's stationary. The ether is moving within the Earth, and you can't hide this shit anymore. It's going to catch up to you. Because the sun is moving within the Earth, and the sun's going to stop, and there's a glass sky, and the ice attached to the glass sky is going to fall and decimate humanity. Said it over and over again. So that's what you guys need to understand. When a silly spinner talks about gravitational waves, it's just simply controlled interferometry detecting ether waves. Thanks for watching. You're inside the Earth. Tell a friend.